group, and it's like the chat goes all day like Sharon's icons did.
Yeah, like I say, I haven't been to an Icons event with Sharon for a few months, but it's okay. I've been to plenty and I have access to Sharon when I need him. So you pay for the access is what I say.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
cool. Ready?
Ready?
Welcome back, everybody, to this week's. Let me try this over. Welcome back to today's episode of the RE Agent Podcast, the number one agent podcast, the number one real estate agent, the number one. Cody, where's Cody at? The number one real estate agent podcast in the world. I normally bug Cody, and now I have to beat Cody. This is aggressive. Let's try it one more time. Welcome back to this episode of the RE Agent Podcast, the number one real estate agent podcast in the world. I am your host, Vikram Deal. Today, Cody is off gallivanting. Who knows what he's doing? Probably smoking weed or something. With what these kids from Canada do. God knows he lets me loose on this podcast, and who knows what's going to happen. So I have a friend of mine that's a guest of ours, and she's pretty cool, but I'm supposed to do like some chat by myself thing, like talk about what's going on in my world and, be personal and all this weird stuff. But Lorraine, I don't know that I can do this by myself. I mean, it's like me in the shower talking to myself again. And I already had my shower time today. So without further ado, you guys, I want to bring in one of my friends. I met her through Sharon. And you guys, if you've listened to any of our podcasts, you know that Cody and I love Sharon. He's a friend, a mentor, been a business partner, been a coach of mine, just a lot of really cool things. And anybody that comes, as Cody will say, anybody that comes through Sharon's ecosystem shares similar values and ethics and just beliefs. And so I'm really excited to bring in our guest, Lorraine Bieto. She is in the greater Atlanta area, but if you guys are watching this on YouTube, you'll see her shirt that says Flip the Switch. And she's got a pretty interesting thing. And for those of you who have sold real estate for years, but you've never bought real estate, this might be your podcast. Or if you got into real estate because you're like, I know I can make a lot of money, I love helping people, but I don't want to sell real estate until I'm 80 years old, because I'll tell you, I did it for 8 years and it's a lot of work. And so this might be the podcast for you, because Lorraine acquired properties during the pandemic. She found sellers who were willing to give her their properties for zero money down. I don't know how she did that, but she's going to go into it. But Lorraine, why don't you give us a quick overview of who you are and what you're all about?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Who I am, that's a hard, people ask me that all the time. And my background actually came from Wall Street. I worked on the mortgage-backed securities trading floor in New York before moving to Atlanta, and got licensed in real estate right out of college. My girlfriend said, let's go, we get our real estate licenses for, shits and giggles. And I'm like, okay, fine. I never sold in New York. I kept my license active. I worked full time. And then I wound up doing appraisals on the weekends. So I have been tied to real estate for what seems like forever. We relocated to Atlanta in 96.
Okay.
And I was like, great, I get to be a stay-at-home mom. And that lasted 90 days because we moved to a town where we knew nobody. And I said, I have to get out there. And as much as I want to, be a stay-at-home mom, I was pulling my hair out. So real estate for me was great because I put her in daycare like half days to get her out and get her socializing. And it gave me time to do something that I've loved. So I started selling when we moved to Atlanta. Fast forward wine to, let's see, 2013. I'm going to go fast here.
Okay.
We did a big guru boot camp for investing. We did a bus tour. We went out to Texas and we did all of this stuff. And I started helping investors in the group, pointing out why their deals didn't make sense. And it was like, okay, you're not taking into account, holding costs and taxes and agent commissions. And so I grew up following organically, which I didn't even know what the word organic was. Someone called me like, this is great, you're doing this organically. And kind of became the niche person here in Atlanta for that group. That group had like 20,000 people in it.
Oh.
So what I started doing, because I had such a vast background, and that's the other thing. People are like, oh my God, you understand my background is years. I also did mortgages for a short period of time in there, and we had bought rental properties.
Okay.
So when I started doing that, I started helping out of state investors acquire the property here in Atlanta. I managed the renovation, and then I put the property on the market,
Okay.
essentially creating additional listing inventory.
Totally.
It was after coming out of those closings when I was looking at their check compared to my check. And I'm like, okay, I'm making, 10, 12 grand, before paying the broker or 15, whatever,
Yep.
And they're making 25, 125, and I said, okay, I need to do this. And so I flipped the switch. And not only was I working with investors, but I also became an investor.
Gotcha.
And for us, we fixed some sweet cash properties. I'm now in a self-storage deal.
Okay.
And as I was having conversations, there was one conversation in particular in 2019 where I had attended a CE class.
Mhm.
I was the only agent that showed up, and I wound up talking to the attorneys because they ran the event. So they talked about, we talked about what we were doing, and we were flipping properties at the time. And I said, I think this is something agents should also look into. So they asked to teach the class. And I said, sure. I didn't have a class. I put it together. Um, had 30 agents that attended, and it was really funny because I walked out and I saw my old Keller Williams team leader standing there and didn't realize KW was having bold going on at the time. And they can get really loud and rah-rah in bold. And I stopped in the middle of my presentation and I said, they're in there learning how to get their next deal. You're in here learning how to create passive income, build wealth, and have a way to retire.
Right.
And at that point, I knew I was onto something because I had really great feedback. And then I had a conversation, you said, with one of my very good friends. And she's like, girl, how are you? I'm tired of selling houses. My back hurts. I've shown these people 50 houses. They can't make a decision. I'm going to have to sell houses until I'm 70. That stopped me in my track. And I said, why? You're a $10 million producer. And she said, I have no retirement. And I'm sitting here going, okay, I'm not a $10 million producer. I never was, never planned on being. My business is all word of mouth. And I sat there and I said, but I have passive income that can help me, sustain some, not all of my bills, but it can help me sustain some of my bills because we have passive income from rentals.
Mhm.
And that's when I sat down and I wrote the book. It's my words. There was a ghostwriter. And I just kind of identify things as a real estate agent. Here's what your maximum offer should be. I have formulas in there, what's the ARV, the after repair value. So I literally took it from an agent's perspective and what you already know and the tools that you already have access to be able to do this. And then I list 4 or 5 case studies in my updated book on how I acquired 3 properties in particular with no money out of my pocket, or one was $1,400.
So super cool. Like I know when Strawn and I were talking about why he went back to Real, because Strawn didn't have a need to go back to a company financially, and he shared that he was tired, and I think he shared this in a webinar. And if you didn't, Strawn, I'm sorry, I'm sharing it. But he shared a story where he was talking about how when he ran not Douglas Elliman but Telus Properties, these agents would be making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they've been in the market for years, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. And he would see them get ready to retire and they had nothing. Nobody wanted to take over their book of business. Nobody wanted to pay them for their book of business, right? It was just kind of like this, you've worked so hard to build something and then it's just done. It just dies. And a lot of them left with, their book of business didn't sell. So they thought maybe I'll get a couple 100,000 from this big book of business and got nothing. And he said when he would see his agents leaving, and I'm paraphrasing, he had this like just really bad feeling in his stomach. that is like, man, you guys worked your whole life for nothing almost. Like you had a great life, but at the end you have nothing that you can sell. You have no saleable asset. And that's one of the reasons why he got into real. It's one of the reasons why I switched over, and a lot of other people, is because we want to have potentially a asset that we can work through or produce some income from us. But it's also because it's a legacy piece. And owning real estate is a legacy thing, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And to your point, I mean, like I said, even before we were chatting, I had an agent last year who begged me for my clients, my sellers, to take her client's offer because they were VA. This is the sixth house they had bid on because she couldn't get them under contract.
Right.
And we built a relationship, and she said, my husband wants me to retire and I can't.
Right.
And I asked her why. And she said, well, I'm 65. And she said, I have no retirement. And so that's when I asked her, do you own any real estate assets? And she said, the house that I live in. And so it's still out there, right? The need is still out there. We're in a shifting market.
Yeah.
Things are getting tighter. And it kind of like you and Sharon, like it kills me that I've seen these people spend years and years and years,
yeah,
and they really don't have anything to show for it, because a lot of agents are more interested in, let me show you the car, right?
Yeah.
It's all about perception. But they're not thinking about, wait a minute, I don't have a 401k. They can set their own up, right? Or a Roth or an IRA or whatever. But nobody is out there telling them you should, or in my opinion, you should be doing these things to plan for, when you want to retire.
It's just a lot of work, right? Like being a real estate entrepreneur, you're really an entrepreneur. You have a small business, you are responsible for everything. And it's a tremendous amount of work. And then to think about trying to go home, this is why I didn't buy real estate when I was selling real estate, and we had access to so many deals. Everything was a deal, 6 years ago. It was just overwhelming to think about having to go out and do it. So how do you, when you say flip the switch, like what is flipping the switch? Because when I say flip the switch, it means something totally different. But when you flip the switch, like, what does that mean mindset wise? Like, what are you trying to convey to these real estate agents out there? And you said, like, I was never a $10 million producer. So, I never made $200,000-300,000 selling real estate, but I bought rental properties, right? So how does somebody flip the switch that maybe isn't a, big producer, and they're just, and they don't want to be like, we make our money, we're happy, but we'd like to start putting some money away from the side. Like, how do you go and flip the switch into that mindset?
So for me, it was like I said, when I was walking out of those closings and I saw how much these guys were making. For me, it's all of the deals that I have done, or all the properties I've acquired, have come to me because I was a real estate agent. It wasn't that I was out there looking for it. I wasn't out there pounding. And I'll give you a perfect example. Probably about, at this point, I met a woman at a birthday party, at a friend's birthday party. We started talking because she had some rental properties, and I'm like, oh, I also invest. And so that's all we talked about. We became friends on Facebook, and it's probably now at this point been 5 or 6 years. And she called me up and she said, hey, I have a property. I think I want to sell it. Can you come look at it? And I said, no problem. So I went out there. Like you said, you could find good deals about 6-7 years ago. And I told her she was upside down. She wanted to list it. She wanted to put the property on the market, but she was upside down. She owed 90. It was worth 70. These are solid numbers. And I said to her, well, do you have a problem tenant? I said, even if I list it for free, you're coming to the table with a big chunk of change. Right. Like, what's the story? And she said, I just don't like being a landlord, but I have a great tenant. She always pays on time. She doesn't bother me. I said, are you cash flowing? She said, yes. I said, then leave it alone.
Yeah.
Okay. Because at that point, she needed to do a short sale, but she had excellent credit. She wasn't late. She wasn't behind. That didn't make sense.
Right.
January of 2020, she called me. And she said, hey, Lorraine, do you remember that property that I had out in Smyrna? And I said, sure, I do. And she said, God told me it's time to sell. Okay. She said, the guy next door put lipstick on a pig and sold it for $121. So I'm not upside down anymore. Can you come take a look at it? I said, yeah, or maybe I'll buy it. I kind of just threw it out there. Maybe I'll buy it. And if we can come up with something creative, because I said, what do you want to do? And she said, I want to walk away.
Okay.
So I went to the property, walked through it. My husband went with me. He checks the crawl space. I don't check the crawl space. And we started talking, and the place hadn't been touched since like the 1970s, original appliances, like almost original everything, except for the fridge. And I was walking down the steps, and she goes, so what do you think? And I said, it's just like everything is original. And I had already talked to her about potentially buying the property, giving her some money for it,
Right.
and taking it over as a rental.
Okay.
And she looks at me and she goes, I was thinking 5. And I knew she meant $5,000. She said, what do you think? And I said, I don't know. Let me talk to Rui, which is my husband. He's in the crawl space. And I guess I can never play poker because you can read my face.
Gotcha.
And she says to me, she goes, wait a minute, Lorraine, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I don't know about 5, let me see.
Right.
And she says, no, I'm going to pay you $5,000
Oh shit.
to take over the property.
That's
Yeah,
that's
kind of like
nice.
you. Like my face dropped to the ground, and I just looked at her and I said,
uh,
wait. I said, what's going on? I said, I know you have a son in the military. I know you have a grandson who's probably 7 or 8 by now. What is going on?
right.
Her first words out of her mouth were, how do you remember all of that with everything that you have going on?
Sure.
I remember this from a conversation we had 5-6 years prior.
Right.
So we walked outside and I told her, I can't do that. I can't take $5,000. I don't
I
feel
need
right
20. I need 20.
No. I said, I don't feel right about it. She goes, after everything you've done for me. And in my head, I'm going, I haven't done anything for you except give you sound advice on why you should not have put your property on the market, and all this other stuff.
Well, I mean, you gotta remember though, like if she would have put her property on the market whenever a couple of years ago, she would have come to the table with 20 grand. Like,
Correct.
So, like you essentially took her from being upside down to right side up by just being a good human being, like thinking about the client, not thinking about yourself, which, if more real estate agents did that, they probably would have better longevity with their business.
So that exactly to my point. I think most real estate agents would have been trying to think like, how do I get a sign in the yard?
Right.
Right. And a sign in the yard at that point was not going to solve her problem.
Right.
And, like I said, we went out there and I said, all right, we'll see. So we decided I would take $2,500 because there was quite a bit of wood rot on the outside.
Okay.
And she would pay the closing costs. And her other concern, which was, you don't know what motivates people. Her other concern was, she said, if I put the house on the market, which hers would probably be worth maybe about 110. So instead of the 121.
Sure.
Her concern was to not displace her tenant.
Yeah.
Because she said, if I put it on the market, does the tenant have to move? I said, well, if it's an owner occupant, yes. Yep. She said, I don't want to do that. So we went to closing. I got $2,500. I got a cash flowing property. We upped the rent $100 a month. This was Friday, the 13th, March of 2020, just as the world was shutting down. And I thought, oh my goodness. We still have that property. The tenant moved out last year, October. She moved out in October. We then upped the rent a little bit, but we were still about $300 a month below market rent.
Oh, geez.
So I took it over subject to.
Okay.
So I took over the property subject to the existing mortgage, and that's a creative finance strategy that you need to know.
Let's talk about let's not necessarily talk about specific strategies, but let's talk about why, I have some inklings on why real estate agents don't get into the market and why they can't find creative deals is because they don't even know what these terms are.
Correct.
So how, we've had, other guests talk about creative financing, but when you say the term creative financing, what does that mean to you?
To me, it's thinking outside the box. To me, it's not somebody going to get an FHA, a VA, or a conventional loan.
Okay.
It's where you're working with the seller to find terms that make them happy and make you happy.
So how do you bring up this this notion, this crazy notion to, do this creative financing. And then we'll talk about how do you talk to a bank that will allow you to take over the existing mortgage. But how do you bring it up? So you're chit-chatting with the seller, you say, hey, it might not be worth you selling the home on the open market. It might be better if we do something off market, or it might be better if, like I'm an investor, if we do something. Do you take commissions on deals where you buy them direct?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you take commissions on deals where you buy them
No.
direct?
No, no.
Okay,
no.
so the seller saves out on 4, 5, 6%, 7%, whatever your commission rate is, right? So that's a nice savings for them. But how do you bring that up? Like, hey, it might not actually be, and then there's the legality, right? So obviously run everything through your broker, but how do you bring that up and say this might be in your best interest?
So I talk to people. I
Okay,
build relationships.
okay,
And she flat out said, so then I asked her what is going on. And she said, I want to walk away. Yes, my son's in the military. My grandson's 7, turning 8. I have another son in the military. And I want to retire to Florida. I just want to walk away. She wanted to walk away and not kick her tenant out of a home that she's had for 8 years. That was her motivation. And since she already had rental properties, she had a little bit of a familiarity with how subject to works.
okay.
And so I went through it again. I explained it to her, and I am full transparency. So we took it over subject to the existing mortgage. You have to have the attorney that knows the paperwork. And like you said, make sure all your legalities are covered, that everything's taken care of. And she saw that we were making the mortgage payment online every month, because the one thing people need to understand when you do a subject to deal, the mortgage stays in the owner's name.
Okay.
So don't go screw it up and go screw up their credit, because that is not why you're doing this. The thing is, you acquire it, you improve it, you do a cash out refi, which is what we did.
Okay.
And it's just really, I mean, for me, it's listening to people. And because I did that investor boot camp, I've always wanted to, God, I bought the Carlton Sheets box off TV back when I was like 18 and, in the 80s, right? So it's something I've always wanted to learn more about. So I have also invested in attending the RIAs and the masterminds and, the webinars and the boot camp. So it's an education process.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. I don't think real estate agents ever really invest in themselves either, to go learn something different that can help someone else. Because last year, a year later, I bought her other property because she kept calling me every other month. Don't you want the other house? I said, it's too far. It needs 20 grand worth of work. It's over an hour for me. But she kept calling me because this woman was paying an $890 a month mortgage on a vacant property for 4 years. And that one, before we bought it, she replaced the missing AC condenser. She upgraded the electrical. She replaced the plumbing that had been stolen. And she made the mortgage payments for 6 months while I rehabbed it. I rehabbed it in 7 weeks and got a tenant in there. I sold that one. We sold that one last year.
So I'm
I
hearing
don't know
a
if I
couple of
answered your
things.
question.
No, I'm hearing a couple of things. One is relationships matter, right?
100%.
The relationships matter a lot, right? So we have relationships. The other thing I'm hearing though is you have spent a lot of time educating yourself to become familiar with the terms, the language, with different things. Obviously, once you get boots on the ground, you'll really get your feet wet. But you learned a lot of the things that most real estate agents don't know, right? Leave alone like apply it. They don't even know that it exists out there. Like they haven't even heard of it, right? And so when you're sitting there talking with somebody about doing creative financing, if you don't know the language that they speak, right? If you're trying to talk about subject tos and refi, cash out refis and blah, 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 and you don't even know what that means. And they're saying like, hey, yeah, we'd be open to something like this and this and this. And you're like glossed over, like you just smoked a doobie. You're probably not going to instill a lot of confidence in that person. And so when you purchased the property, you got a renter in there, and then you refinanced it. What do you tell the seller at that point? Like, hey, we're done. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. What's the conversation like?
So this one I already had a relationship with this person. The
Okay.
very first deal I did, which was our lake house, was actually an agent that was in my old office when I was at KW, who was running through the office going, "Who wants a listing on Lake Lanier?" And I'm going, "I don't want a listing on Lake Lanier. You out of your mind?" And so I said, "Sure, I'll take it." She didn't want a referral fee. She didn't want anything. And
Huh.
that was when I looked at it and I'm like, yeah, because the property is only worth about $70,000. She couldn't be bothered. So that was my first, we'll call it, that was the very first subject to I did with a stranger, with someone who I had no relationship with.
Okay.
And it was the same conversation I had with them. I went up to the house, and that story's they're all in my book.
Sure.
I went up to go look at the property. The lady had a stroke, had the mind of a 5-year-old. I get there, she didn't want to let me in the house.
Hmm.
And I drove an hour. And so and as she came to the door, and it's a full plate glass, door, I'm looking through the door, and when she opens, I'm scoping out the inside of the house as best as I can. And she just told me, "I'm sorry, dear, today's not a good day."
Hmm.
And I just looked at her and I said, "I understand, but I drove an hour. Can I just take a quick walk around? I'll be in and out in 5 minutes."
Right.
Says to me, "You look like a nice enough girl, no problem." And she was probably in her 50s at the time, her early 50s. So she let me in. I looked at everything quickly because at this point we had already been fixing and flipping. No, we hadn't started fixing and flipping yet. Actually, this was in 2005. But I went through it. We had some knowledge. We had some rentals. My husband's handy. And I came back out and I got the car and I said to my husband, "We need to figure out how to buy this house." And we had already done a boot camp probably a year or two before that with a local guru here in Metro Atlanta. And we learned about subject to.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to them. It was the same thing. I asked them at the end of the day, like, "What do you want?" I said, "Because I have concerns. If I put the house for sale and I put a sign in the yard," I said, "I'm more concerned about her safety than anything else, because if I have clients or agents that drive up with their client and she decides not to let them in, it's going to piss everybody off."
Yeah, it can be a tough one.
And I'm concerned for her safety because she came to the door in a nightgown that you could almost see through. Okay. So that's when I realized. And then they told me she had had a stroke and her faculties weren't all there.
Sure, makes sense.
So I said the same thing. "Well, at the end of the day, what is your goal? What do you want to do?" And they said, "Well, we're putting it on the market because we're moving her to
Close.
assisted living."
Okay.
And I explained to them the same thing. I said, "Well, there's a strategy. I will buy the property if you're okay with that. And there's a
Yep.
strategy that's called subject to." So I explained it to them, told them everything that it was, how it worked. And then their other concern was, "Well, she needs to be in the house another 2 weeks." I said, "That's not a problem. You take your time."
Right.
And they said, "But then we have to clean it out." I said, "Don't worry about cleaning it out. I will take care of it. You take whatever you want, whatever you need. If you need some help, let me know." And that was it. And I still have that property. It's our lake house.
So when we do a subject to, right, when we do a subject to outside of the attorney, are we talking to the bankers? Are we assuming the loan because it stays in their name? So like, what is the process that needs to happen, like at a very high level, just so that people have a broad understanding? What does that even look like? Can
So
you do a subject to on any property?
So far I've not had one not happen. So yes, you can do a subject. Now, I'm not an attorney, so
Yep.
let's take that caveat. Okay, I'm not an
Yep.
attorney.
Yep.
I know several investors that do subject to
Yep.
as a strategy.
Okay.
We did not assume her loan,
Right.
because when you assume somebody's loan, you have to go through and qualify. First, you have to
Right.
see if the loan's assumable.
Right.
And then if you do talk to the bank, you have to go and qualify to assume the loan.
Right.
What we did, and I don't know if it varies by state, so let me start with that caveat. We had 2 attorneys that know how to do subject to properties. And basically, we do get the deed to the property,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes into an irrevocable trust
Okay.
with us as the beneficiaries.
Got it.
In a nutshell. That's pretty much in a nutshell. That's how we take title to it. We get power of attorney. We send the power of attorney to the banks to say, "Hey, we're the power of attorney for so-and-so. Now
Okay.
everything is online. So we just log in, with the passwords and pay the mortgage online.
Got it.
Um, can it accelerate the loan? Can the bank call the due on sale clause? 100%. And then accelerate the loan and the whole loan's due. I've never had that happen. I don't know that it's ever happened to any of the investors that I know either.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, and like I said, you want to hold this maybe 90 days, 120 days. The goal is not to have this property for 5, 10, 20 years in the seller's name. Because remember, if they then go try to buy something else, that
They have
loan's
a
still
loan.
sitting out there in their name. Right.
Right.
And it's on their credit. So it's a lot you really need to think it through. And the person that you're doing this with really needs to understand the process. And if
Gotcha.
somebody has an ounce of hesitation, I won't do it.
Got it.
I won't do it. I gotta
Uh,
feel good and they have to feel good.
no, I love it. This has been an interesting one, you guys. Like, there are so many ways to make money in real estate outside of just selling real estate. And your clients are doing this. And Lorraine shared how she was able to, with one strategy, get multiple properties over the years and make a ton, make a lot of money doing it, like, and build long-term wealth doing it as well. And so you don't have to sell real estate. And if something happens, you have a little bit of a nest egg coming in every month. Lorraine, thank you so much. If somebody wants to reach out to you or somebody wants to get your book, Flip the Switch, where can they reach out to you and where can they find the book?
So the book's on Amazon, and you talked about terms earlier.
Yep.
I have at the very end the lingo. What is ARV? What is ROI? And explain what all of that is.
Cool.
There's also other ways to get involved. If you love what you do, yet you can joint venture, you could be a private lender. I cover all of that.
Cool.
In basic language because I wrote it. So you can pick it up on Amazon, and you have to put either the whole thing, which is flip the switch from real estate agent to real estate investor,
Okay.
or if you just put flip because someone else also has a flip the switch book, or you could put flip the switch Lorraine Beato. I am Lorraine Beato across all platforms. I have LorraineBeato.com. I'm Lorraine Beato on Instagram. Lorraine Beato on LinkedIn. So I'm a realtor. I'm pretty easy to find.
Lorraine, thank you so much. This was really a cool episode. And you guys, if you're out there trying to figure out what your next step in life is and you want to produce some wealth for yourself or something you can pass on to the kids, or just so you don't have to sell houses till you're 75 years old and you get to enjoy the hard work that a lot of your clients are probably enjoying your hard work, go buy the book, go reach out to Lorraine. And you guys, thank you so much for being here. Lorraine, thank you for being here. This is the RE Agent Podcast, the number one agent podcast for real estate agents in the world. Let me hit stop.